last October, she said something to the effect of January 6th was a riot. And if you think about what our Declaration of Independence says, it says to overthrow tyrants. And now what we will be able to add to that is to ask her questions under oath. So we'll have to see if all of that taken together might get over the bar of engaging in insurrection.
I'm Benjamin Wittes, and this is the Lawfare podcast, April 20th, 2022. Monday evening on the Tucker Carlson show, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene was complaining that she had to submit to sworn questioning in connection with the January 6th insurrection. That will come on Friday in a case designed to disqualify her as an insurrectionist from future holding of office. It will take place before an administrative law judge in Georgia, her home state, and that makes this the first case brought under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment to actually move to discovery. To update us on the Marjorie Taylor Greene case and the other Section 3 of the 14th Amendment disqualification litigations, Roger Parloff, Lawfare senior editor, joined me in the virtual jungle studio. We talked about how this case came to an actual testimony by Marjorie Taylor Greene, where the other 14th Amendment disqualifications are, and what we should expect in her live stream testimony on Friday. It's the Lawfare podcast, April 20th. Marjorie Taylor Greene faces insurrection questions. So, Roger, Marjorie Taylor Greene was on Tucker Carlson last night complaining that she is going to have to be questioned on Friday in connection with the January 6th insurrection. What is she talking about, and is it true?
It does seem to be true. Unless there is a sudden emergency stay entered, it's a pretty remarkable situation. Some voters are challenging her under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which is the post-Civil War section that basically bars people that have been involved in insurrections or rebellions from holding certain offices. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. And this voter challenge was made in Georgia under the state procedures to try to keep her off the ballot as unqualified. And this is a regular procedure that's used frequently for much lesser types of disqualification, like not being old enough or not living in the state or not living in the right part of the state. But this time the claim is that she's disqualified under Section 3 as an insurrectionist. So she went into federal court and tried to block this. And this is, so far, what I've described is pretty much what people heard happen with Madison Cawthorn a month or two ago. But this time, the federal court said, no, I'm not blocking this. And apparently, she's going to leave it there. She could have tried to appeal to the 11th Circuit, but maybe she doesn't want to spend the money. Maybe she thinks politically she can even use this to her benefit. It will look like the liberals are picking on her or trying to cancel her or so on. So whatever calculation, it looks like the hearing's going to go forward. It goes in front of an administrative law judge who's been appointed by the Secretary of State. This is all standard Georgia procedure. She can be called as an adverse witness by the people challenging her. So this will be the first member of Congress who has been forced to testify about January 6th. So it's pretty momentous. The Select Committee, it seems, the House Select Committee on this subject has basically, it seems, decided not as a matter of policy to force members to appear. You remember they invited Jordan to appear, Jim Jordan, but he declined and they did not subpoena him. So this is a first.
All right. So, what do we know about Marjorie Taylor Greene's activities in connection with January 6th? The standard under the 14th Amendment is that she is barred from serving further in Congress if, having previously taken an oath to preserve and protect the Constitution, she engaged in insurrection or supported it with aid and comfort. What do we know about what she did?
Well, the allegations are that she certainly she promoted the rally at the Ellipse. Certainly, she promoted the big lie, the notion that the election was stolen. Certainly, she always uses very violent rhetoric. She was sort of famous for this rhetoric about Pelosi having committed treason, and the penalty for treason is death. And then, as you get closer to January 6th, there are some tweets and videos that get more and more angry and violent in tone. She begins to talk about the day before. She said that tomorrow could be our 1776 moment. And this was a phrase that the plaintiffs allege was sort of a code word for violence. And that's not a preposterous claim. If you look at, if when you get steeped in the right-wing media and social media as this thing approached, it does appear that 1776, I think that's a case can be made that that's what was happening. That's what those words meant. Ali Alexander frequently, he talked about we always have the 1776 option, if Pence didn't do the right thing or if the congressman didn't do the right thing. And so there's that. And then subsequently, she has become an apologist for the insurrectionists.
She's been an advocate for the people who are
yes,
on trial.
Yeah, she's praised them as patriots and political prisoners. Going back a bit, on December 19th, which was that was the date that Trump talked about. That was the tweet about it's going to be wild. Come to January 6th, it'll be wild. She had a tweet the same day saying that she was, quote, planning a little something on January 6th as well, unquote. And then there was a quote. Now, I don't know what the timing of this was, but she did say at one point, you can't allow it to just transfer power peacefully like Joe Biden wants and allow him to become our president because he did not win this election. He's guilty of treason. It's a crime punishable by death, is what treason is. Nancy Pelosi is guilty of treason. And then, like I said, after the event, she has been an apologist. Last October, she said something to the effect of January 6th was a riot. And if you think about what our Declaration of Independence says, it says to overthrow tyrants. So there's this. And now what we will be able to add to that is to ask her questions under oath. So we'll have to see if all of that taken together might get over the bar of engaging in insurrection.
Right. It certainly seems like in and of itself, these are matters of inflammatory rhetoric that probably don't get you to participating in insurrection. But combined with the sort of admissions you might be able to elicit in live testimony, it's pretty close to the line, right?
I think that's right. Certainly with our First Amendment protections, I think it's hard with just this. There's always been that question about, well, did anyone give tours to people beforehand? We there's a lot of things we don't know the answer to. She allegedly had an associate, a close friend that was involved in the riot, although he was not arrested. So there's a lot of sort of loose ends that could possibly go somewhere. But I think you're right. We're not, just this alone may not do it.
All right. So if memory serves, Marjorie Taylor Greene was actually elected the same day as Joe Biden was, which means she would have been in office, I think, for 3 days at the time of the January 6th riot/insurrection. Is that correct?
Yeah, she took an oath January 3rd, 2021.
So that does, in a very technical sense, meet the terms of the 14th Amendment, Section 3. But
Right.
it's not quite like, sitting members of Congress or the Senate who resigned their office to go, take offices in the Confederacy, right? It's kind of like, she just got there and this happened. But I don't think that gives her any argument, hey, previously doesn't mean 3 days ago.
No, I don't think so. I don't. I think that's one of the few parts of this that the plaintiffs have down pat. I think they've met that requirement. I don't think anyone challenges that. I think that someone might challenge what you said earlier about the pertinent language of the 14th Amendment. What it says is people who, after having taken this oath, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the same, meaning against the United States, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. And aid and comfort there might be a reference to foreign enemies. I spoke to at least one professor who thinks that, that tracks the language of the treason clause in the Constitution. And so he believes that would refer to foreign enemies, and not that you would simply be able to provide aid and comfort to insurrectionists.
It's true, although that would be a very odd reading. I mean, I always assumed it was a reference to the people like, the Northerners who supported the Confederacy, some of them violently, as in if you were a member of Congress who was doing that, you would be disqualified here, no?
I don't know about that. Now, it is true that the words engaged in themselves, engaged in insurrection, in the context of the Civil War, did not always have to mean that you were violent. There's one definition I'll read a definition from a North Carolina Supreme Court case, 1869, voluntarily aiding the rebellion by personal service or by contributions other than charitable of anything that was useful or necessary in the Confederate service. And it was interpreted pretty broadly. Now, of course, that was a different situation. There was a whole, semi-country carved out of this one. And so if people were acting as sheriffs in a southern state, and they weren't, necessarily fighting, they were just doing what sheriffs do in any state, that would be considered enough to be, engaging in the rebellion. So you could even have an inspector of flour. If he takes an oath, he could be come under this category.
But of course, that doesn't really solve our Madison Cawthorn or MTG problem. They're not officials of the free state of insurrection. They're actually people who are there ostensibly doing their jobs as members of Congress, certifying or refusing to certify the vote. They're just sympathetic to and maybe engaging with the insurrectionists, right?
That's right. And another thing that gets fuzzy with these all of these cases, and now there are 9 such cases pending across the
country. So we're gonna come to in a moment the scope of these litigations.
But there were a lot of things going on. We now know, there was this alternate electors scheme, which had various different flavors. There was the attempt to have Pence, call for a 10-day audit or simply not count the votes or throw it to the House. There were all these different schemes, and some are more, colorably legal than others, and some are nonviolent, and they might be crimes, like, the alternate elector scheme. That might be a crime. It might be a fraud on the United States. It might be corrupt obstruction of a congressional proceeding. But is it an insurrection without violence? No, I don't think so. Civil unrest, I think, is pretty basic. So you do get some of these cases, including Marjorie Taylor Greene. She objected to the electoral slates from Arizona and Pennsylvania, like, more than 100 congressmen did. I don't think that gets you very far. So there's a mosaic here. A lot of things are thrown in the mix, but without some sort of big discovery coming out of discovery, I don't think these get over the bar.
All right. So before we come to what the plaintiffs and petitioners will be trying to get from her in this hearing, I want you to talk about these other 8 cases. This one's the outlier that has actually gone to discovery and produced a kind of real-time deposition of the member. What's happened with the other cases?
Well, Cawthorn was the first, Madison Cawthorn, and the same pattern began, but a different judge in North Carolina ruled for Cawthorn, a federal judge, to block the petition from going forward, the state proceeding from going forward. And he actually ruled, he took one of the least likely, in my humble opinion, bases for blocking it, which was he ruled that the Amnesty Act of 1872, after the Civil War, was prospective, and it reached forward and it granted amnesty to everyone in the future, and including Madison Cawthorn, so that mooted out the case. That's now on appeal. It's an expedited appeal, and there's going to be an oral argument May 3rd in front of the Fourth Circuit. So that's an interesting case. And that's now the primary is something like May 23rd, or there isn't going to be a whole lot of time. He's going to be on the ballot, but there's still an outside shot that he could be forced to testify before the election. Jim Banks was briefly challenged, but that was a week long, and it was not a petition. It was basically just a one-page challenge. I don't think that was serious. That was Indiana, the Indiana Election Commission, and it was rejected about 5 days after he made the objection, and he did not pursue it. He was challenged by a Democrat running in the primary, an opponent, a potential opponent, but that was not a very serious challenge. A fairly serious challenge has been filed in federal court in Wisconsin against Senator Ron Johnson and 2 congressmen, Tom Tiffany and Scott Fitzgerald. That one is sort of tied up in these alternate elector schemes issues, which, like I say, I don't know if that's exactly an insurrection. A motion to dismiss was just filed Friday for the congressman. Interestingly enough, it doesn't even bring up that 1872 Amnesty Act issue. I think what most people regard as a stronger issue, also in the Cawthorn case, also in the Marjorie Taylor Greene case, is there is a case to be made, which a professor named Derek Muller does make, that Congress has exclusive power to judge the qualifications of its members. And so that's one theory for trying to get rid of these cases. Then there's another case that was filed in March, and it might be one of the stronger, or maybe the strongest. It's against a county commissioner named Coy Griffin. And he was actually convicted last month for his involvement in the insurrection.
Yeah, that sure helps, having a conviction for activity in connection with insurrection.
Yeah, I would think so. And now it was a misdemeanor, a Class A misdemeanor, and it was nonviolent. And he actually didn't get inside the building. He was in restricted area right out front of the building and near a lot of violence. That's in New Mexico state court. And that's, interestingly, that's different from the others also, because it's not an effort to block him from being put on the ballot for re-election. It's an effort to pull him out of office. And the way you do that, there's an action called a quo warranto action. And I think there's versions of it in most states, although most states you have to be a state official, like the DA or the attorney general, that would bring that action. Here, it apparently allows citizens to bring such actions, and a citizen has brought that action, or several, and that's a pretty serious case. And then Marjorie Taylor Greene, the case against her was filed just last month, and it's gone quickly. And then earlier this month, 3 Arizona figures, Representative Paul Gosar, Andy Biggs, and a state representative named Mark Fincham, were all named in a state lawsuit. Fincham is running for Secretary of State this year. Gosar and Biggs were among the people that were considered, the most likely targets of these, along with Mo Brooks, in the very beginning. I think Ali Alexander has claimed that Paul Gosar and Andrew Biggs helped him, devise, come up with Stop the Steal or something, and they have denied involvement and any wrongdoing, of course. So they're being challenged.
So what do we know about the advocacy group that is coordinating these challenges, and how many of them are they behind?
3 of these have been brought by one group called Free Speech for People, and it was formed some time back. It wasn't formed for this purpose. It brought Madison Cawthorn, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I believe it's bringing the Arizona case. And they have been, ever since the insurrection, they have said that they wanted to try to exclude Trump from the ballot if he tries to run again. They have brought together some quality lawyers for these challenges. The one against Madison Cawthorn involves a couple former Supreme Court justices from the state North Carolina Supreme Court, one Republican, one Democrat. There's a PAC that's bringing the Wisconsin case. It's called the Minocqua Brewing Company Super PAC. It's a liberal group. And then the Coy Griffin one is being brought by CREW, the Citizens
Responsibility and Ethics. I don't
Yes.
remember what the W is for.
Yeah. So that's a very serious group.
All right. So let's talk about this testimony that MTG is going to have to give on Friday, assuming that it happens. If you are the counsel who's going to be questioning her, you want to get her to admit something that moves the bar on what it means to be engaged, right? You want to get her to concede something that you can then argue to a court, hey, look, she said all these things, and then by her own testimony, she did X. We know she wasn't manning barricades. We know she wasn't, assaulting police officers. So what are the things that, if you were litigating this case, you would be looking to get her to admit having done?
Well, the really tough thing here is that, most litigators are taught, you never ask a question you don't know the answer to. Here, every question is going to be of that nature. The administrative law judge denied the opportunity for a deposition beforehand. He also denied a document production request. Now, this does not mean that he's biased against the plaintiffs. He's actually an interesting man, but I think he said that because of the time constraints, and also it's not common to have document production in these sorts of cases, so he denied those. So they're going to be going blind, and they also won't be able to disprove whatever she does say, even if she's not completely candid. So I think it's a very difficult situation. I assume they will ask about her role in funding these things, and was she aware of the very violent rhetoric that was going on online? I don't know if you ask her about her own violent rhetoric, because that just gives her an opportunity to try to wriggle out of some things that have already that sound pretty bad the way they are.
But I think you would want to ask her whether she had contact with any of a long list of people in the relevant time period, right?
Yes, and her interactions with Ali Alexander, her interactions, if any, with Alex Jones, with any Oath Keepers, Proud Boys, Three Percenters, any militia people. I guess you sort of have to ask those, but you may get a series of no. And it'll be live streamed, which is quite amazing.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. How did it come to be live streamed? Is that typical administrative law judge procedure in the state of Georgia?
I don't think it's the subjects of these ALJ hearings usually get a lot of social media interest. But the plaintiffs asked, and he felt it was a matter of, I think, of great public interest. I think the Georgia laws on this are better than, for instance, the federal court laws on this. And he's a very experienced judge. He's a retired lawyer. He's born in 1951, so I guess he's 70 or 71. And he has been doing this for 9 years. His actual specialty is tax law, it seems. Went to Duke, summa cum laude, and Harvard Law cum laude. So, and initially, there's already the plaintiffs group bringing this, the Free Speech for People group, does have on its site some of the rulings that he's given, and also one Zoom meeting he held. And he's a pretty impressive guy, down the middle. But anyway, he decided that it was an issue of great public import. People asked if they could live stream it. She asked them not to. She overruled it. So it's going to happen.
Will you be watching it?
If you'll let me.
Absolutely.
Yes, I plan to watch it, yes.
Roger Parloff, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
The Lawfare podcast is produced in cooperation with the Brookings Institution. Our audio engineer this episode, c'est moi, because, sometimes I just record myself. Look, folks, some of you are material supporters of Lawfare, and we love you very deeply, and we appreciate it very much. Some of you are still not. You guys heard ads on this podcast episode. You guys don't get to come to Lawfare Live. and you don't get other special bonuses that we give to material supporters, you should fix that. www.patreon.com/lawfare. That's patreon.com/lawfare. The Lawfare podcast is edited by Jen Patja Howell. Our music is performed by Sophia Yan. And as always, thanks for listening.